Hello, I'm Sylvia McCarthy. I'm Hyperion's EU Policy Analyst. I work within Hyperion on this concept of proposal intelligence. This is the background analysis of the topics within Pillar 2 of Horizon Europe. And with this presentation, I want to help you to convince you about the link between research and the EU policy making process. Perhaps you have already ordered a proposal intelligence report from me, or you're thinking about ordering a report from me. But this presentation will hopefully make it clearer of this relevance, this link between research and policy making, and will make your work in implementing proposal intelligence in your proposal a bit easier. You have my contact details here on this slide, a link to the Hyperion webpage, and I will repeat these contact details at the end of the presentation in case you need to come back to them. Now, this presentation is going to be about linking those policies to the Pillar 2 topics, looking at how proposal intelligence shows you where the policies come from, the relevant expert groups, then looking at the policy making process as a whole and where research can have the best impact, and showing this link with proposal intelligence in the end. Before I go any further, we need to look at what proposal intelligence means. Now, you'll see a little later on why it's most relevant to topics in Pillar 2. But for now, let's go to the Hyperion triangle, which I'm sure you are familiar with. The politicians and the high-level European Commission officials are the ones who develop the policy. And knowing how those EU policies define the cluster means that you can understand the big picture behind that particular cluster and behind the topic in general. Then going into more detail, we can look at the destinations, the sections, the topics within that cluster, and here we can start to identify the specific policies that define the topics. This word specific is absolutely crucial. The more specific, the more connected you can show your topic is, the more relevant it will be to the policymakers. So this is where you can think about writing the impact on the specific policies. If you don't know what those policies are, how can you write an impact on them? Next stage is looking at the expert groups that have been consulted, how they get their message across to the Commission, how the Commission uses that message. And here you can start to identify impact partners. I'll come back to them. And finally, looking at the work of the researchers. I consult the Cordis database to develop a portfolio of funded projects in relation to the topics that I am dealing with. This means that you can identify potential partners who have been successful in the past, but you can also avoid duplication. The Commission doesn't want to overfund an area that has been well funded in the past. In particular here, I look at CSA's coordination and support actions funded within Horizon Europe and Horizon 2020. For now, just know that I use them to see how the Commission uses foresight, but you can use them for proposal ideas and again, potential partners. So that's the kind of information you'll be getting from a proposal intelligence report. But we need to know why you want that information so we can move on to the first module. This is where we start at a very top level point of view, considering the impact of EU policies. The EU starts off with the 27 member states, for now 27, and the treaties that have been put in place, financed by 1% of the gross national product of those 27 member states. Under the treaties, you have the different policy areas with a European competence. And that's where, in turn, we see the impact pathways of how EU policies are implemented. Are they implemented through funding programs, through new or improved legislation, through the support of the EU agencies, the coordination or support of national activities, and participation in international cooperation? These are the impact pathways from the point of view of the policymakers. Focusing on the funding programs here, we've seen those different policy areas of European competence, such as research and innovation policy, economic policy, education policy, and so on. And they have their related funding programs. Of course, right now we are more focused on Horizon Europe and the 95.5 billion euro that's being used over the 2021-2027 period. But of course, there are going to be those among you who are interested in economic policy, education policy. But the most important word here is impact. Impact assessments of the funding programs as a whole, impact coming from the individual projects funded by those programs. So impact is a word that is never going away when it comes to these huge sums of money that are being put into these funding programs. We're now going to focus on Horizon Europe. So in each slide, we're going a little bit in a little more detail. Horizon Europe, I'm sure you are familiar with the structure of Horizon Europe, but bear with me. It's going to make proposal intelligence more relevant. Horizon Europe is made up of Pillar 1, excellent science. That's where everything funded under Pillar 1 is establishing the EU as a scientific leader. And that's, of course, where you find the European Research Council, Marie Curie, the research infrastructures. Pillar 2, where proposal intelligence lives, is all about addressing global challenges and establishing the EU as an industrial leader. That's where we find the clusters. That's where we find the destinations, the sections, the topics, and the missions. Pillar 3 is all about innovative Europe. That's where you'll find the European Innovation Council, the innovation ecosystems, and the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. It's all about making Europe an excellence in innovation. And then finally, you have widening participation and strengthening the European research area. Why do I focus on Pillar 2 for proposal intelligence? Pillar 1 and Pillar 3 are all bottom-up research. You're free to submit any idea as long as it's excellent in science in relation to Pillar 1 or excellent in innovation in relation to Pillar 3. Pillar 2, of course, requires excellence, but it also requires that the topics address specific EU policy. This is the top-down pillar of Horizon Europe. There is a background to every single topic in Pillar 2. This is why proposal intelligence is needed in this pillar. It's about more than just research. It's about how research is connected to policymaking. This is what the researcher sees. They see a work program, they see clusters, they see a topic, and they see it coming from the European Commission. But we know that there's more to it than that. There's more to the work programs than just what's written in there. There's a background to everything. Horizon Europe started in 2021. That means that, and in advance of that first work program, there was about 3 years worth of work being done in preparation by the policymakers and the experts after the publication of the midterm review of Horizon 2020. We're currently in the middle of the second work program of Horizon Europe. All of the work there has been done since 2021. And while you're working on deadlines for Call 3 and Call 4, the policymakers and the experts are focusing on the work program for Call 5, 6, and 7, the last work program of Horizon Europe. They're also looking towards Framework 10, the midterm review of Horizon Europe. So you can see that every time you pick up a work program, there's at least 2 years worth of knowledge and policy making involved in preparing that work program. So that's where proposal intelligence really comes in. We need to understand, where do the policies come from? What are the challenges and opportunities that have presented themselves to the Commission, to the national politicians, to the European politicians, and made this particular policy area a priority? So let's look at some examples here. The EU challenges. The Commission priorities are a really good example of how this affects your clusters, your topics that you're dealing with. In 2019, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen proposed these priority areas for her commission. And it just really meant that every policy that was initiated by the Commission from 2019 to 2024 would be phrased as addressing these priorities. So if you are working on artificial intelligence within Cluster 4, for example, yes, you're working on something really specific in relation to artificial intelligence, but you're also addressing the European Commission priority on a Europe fit for the digital age. You're starting to think in the language of the Commission, and it's going to make your writing of your impact section a little bit easier, I think, because it makes it more relevant to those who will be reading it. The opportunities are the opportunities for the EU to be an industrial leader or to lead on international cooperation. So you're starting to speak in the language of the European Commission. Now, there are different types of expert groups consulted for Pillar 2 topics, ones that deal with global or societal challenges, ones that deal with industrial or technological leadership. There's a huge amount of expert groups out there, many of them based in Brussels, and they all have different ways of getting their message across, whether it's with a roadmap, a strategic research and innovation agenda, a conference, a position paper, and it's my job to identify the relevant expert groups. And you'll want to know if there's someone in your organization, someone within your network who's on those expert groups, and if not, why not? This is how the messages get across to the Commission. These expert groups are often directly consulted by the European Commission when writing the work programs. So you can often see the language that's used in a topic is connected to a roadmap that was presented by a relevant expert group. And again, they would be ideal partners in any consortium. I'm now going to focus on CSAs just to show you how the Commission uses them, but also how they can be considered as a type of expert group. Now, CSAs are funded under Horizon Europe, but they don't fund research actions. They fund actions around research. So it could be a new standardization action. It could be the organization of a conference. We're most interested in them when they fund a roadmap. We've met people working on CSAs where the Commission is knocking at their door asking if they have some relevant information that can be used for a future research topic, a network, or a policy area. So they're funded on a much shorter basis than the RIAs or the IAs, normally up to 2.5 years, but the information generated by these CSAs is a use of foresight by the European Commission. So it's very strategic from your point of view to analyze CSAs, to be involved in a CSA, or to use the information generated for your proposal. Let me give you an example. It's taken from Cluster 2, from Horizon Europe, a topic on the coordination of European cultural heritage research and innovation among member states. It was funded in 2022, so relatively recently. And the project that has been funded is ARCH, the Alliance for Research on Cultural Heritage in Europe. And one of the expected outcomes for this project, as outlined in the work programme for Cluster 2 back in 2021, was an SRIA that would provide the basis for a future European partnership. So imagine analysing who's on that alliance, who's involved in that effective expert group, and is contributing to that SRIA. That's so much information. Let me give you another example of what I mean by proposal intelligence. Now, this is just within one slide. A proposal intelligence report is going to be a lot more detailed. But let's just take this example of a topic from Cluster 6 on planetary health. I think the deadline was in 2022. Here are some of the EU policies on planetary health that are going to be relevant to that topic. Here are some of the expert groups that were consulted by the European Commission. And here is a very short portfolio of projects taken from the Cordis database. And you can see that first example there is a CSA. Moving on to the EU policy-making process, which I'm going to try and condense and make as relevant as possible to you. We've already seen the challenges and the opportunities that lead to policies being introduced. Your project has been funded. What kind of impact do you need to think about in relation to the policy-making process? What you have to remember here is that the Commission isn't trying to catch you out on your knowledge or lack of knowledge in relation to policy-making. They're asking for this in the proposal guidelines. They want you to describe the possible feedback to policy measures generated by the project that will contribute to designing, monitoring, reviewing, and rectifying existing policy, or shaping and supporting the implementation of new policy initiatives and decisions. They're genuinely reaching out to the researchers and asking them to provide scientific evidence for their policy making. Within the documents, whether it's the work program or the evaluation criteria, the proposal guidelines, they refer to outcomes and impacts. And your outputs are your scientific outputs that come from your project, whether they are models, tools, data. So these are what you have at the end of your project. The Commission refers to outcomes, meaning the short-term results within 2 years of your project ending, and the expected impacts are the long-term impacts, up to 5 to 10 years down the line. So you can imagine this is where the policymakers exist, because that they don't think in short term, they think further down the line in addressing those big priority areas. So we have to find a way of getting those scientific outputs down that line to the impact, to the relevant impact pathways for the policymakers. Let's try to bring the policy-making process into one slide here. Now, we've talked about where the policies start, and we've talked about the implementation or the impact pathways. Getting from start to implementation usually takes 2 to 5 years. An expert report is produced. The Commission prepares a proposal. That proposal is published and referred to the Council of the European Union and the European Parliament for consultation. Once they've agreed on the text between the 3 institutions, the proposal is adopted and implemented in those different ways. The question here is, what's the role of research in this policy-making process? At the start, the Joint Research Centre is involved in identifying priorities, and that's why the policymakers, the researchers within the JRC will refer to the CSAs that are funded in Horizon Europe for foresight and for consultation. When the proposal is in action, the policymakers want to produce evidence-based policymaking. So that is why they call upon the researchers to provide scientific evidence that will support this policymaking, that will show that it is relevant and that it is possible. The last stage in relation to implementing policy is where the CSAs will come in again. They will be providing new monitoring systems, new standards. That's where they are most relevant. But there's a gap. The policymakers want information that is accessible, politically useful, and contributes to finding practical solutions to problems. But when they look at those scientific outputs, they say that this raw scientific evidence is rarely usable in policymaking, and that this difference in language between researchers and policymakers is the greatest obstacle. What they really want is for scientific evidence to be translated into policy meaningful messages. So what we're doing here is filling the gap between scientific outputs and the outcomes of research, filling it with an impact partner who prepares consultation documents, an impact partner who understands the scientific outputs and understands the policymaking process and can see where to fit in that information and make it as relevant as possible. So that's what we're also giving you with proposal intelligence, because we're looking at who are those communicators. Going back to that topic on planetary health, the policymaking process, who's going to care about the outcomes of your proposal? They're the different units within DG Research, DG Environment, the committees in the European Parliament, the agencies. And there are the potential impact partners. These are the expert groups that were already consulted by the European Commission when writing this topic within Pillar 2, within Cluster 6 of Pillar 2. They understand the scientific outputs and they understand how to translate them into scientific evidence for the policymakers. You can also have the Joint Research Centre here as a potential impact partner. So I hope I've given you an idea of the amount of information that is out there, the relevance of proposal intelligence reports, and how they can make your work a little easier when you are submitting a proposal for a Pillar 2 topic. So please do get in touch either with my email address there, or you can scan this QR code and go directly to my LinkedIn profile. I look forward to hearing from you.